Dust howled through Bitter Springs' Rusty Nail Saloon as dusk bled despair into every corner, and despair clung to the air like stubborn smoke. Shadows lengthened beneath cascades of dust, and in that relentless twilight, the cries and murmurs of broken souls mingled with the rattling of loose boards. It was here, amid the parched mirth of a frontier town in late 1870s Arizona, that fate twisted its cruel arm around Eliza Dunn, a young woman beaten every day for being too sick to work. Eliza, in her early 20s and as fragile as a desert bloom, had long endured the relentless brutality of the saloon's overseers. Her skin, pallid and marked by the fervor of fever, bore the scars of isolation and abuse, while her eyes shimmered with troubled defiance. Clad in rags that barely shielded her from the scorching Arizona sun, she fell to the floor of the Rusty Nail Saloon one fateful evening as the bitter taste of rejection mingled with the sting of blood. Her only solace was a small gold band clutched tightly around her wrist, a mysterious token that pulsed with hidden meaning, a secret that had brought silent pain to her every day. That evening, as patrons sneered and the saloon's whiskey stench mingled with the aura of desolation, Silas Vane, ruthless and greedy, a saloon keeper whose eyes burned with cruelty, stripped Eliza of what little dignity she had left. His merciless blows echoed in the low, haunting lamplight as he claimed her frailty as a burden too great to bear. Every strike, every harsh word, was a reminder to all that she was too sick to work, and that mercy was as scarce as water in Bitter Springs. Silas's hardened features twisted with each lash he delivered, his gaze lingering on that small, glimmering gold band as though it contained a deep, forbidden wealth. In his eyes, that band sparked a furious, almost religious greed. A burning desire possessed a secret he suspected lay within. At the precise moment when hope seemed utterly lost, a lone cowboy stepped from the shifting shadows. Jonah Creed, a quiet drifter with eyes like weathered stone and a heart heavy with solitude, had watched from a doorway as the cruel spectacle unfolded. Clad in a worn duster and a battered hat that shaded his solemn gaze, Jonah moved with the deliberate grace of one who has tasted both sorrow and redemption. His intervention was as sudden as it was unexpected, a low, commanding rumble that cut through the cacophony of abuse. "Hold it!" Jonah's voice boomed, rough yet protective, as he strode into the fray. In one swift motion, he intercepted Silas's brutal advances, forcing the saloon keeper to stagger back in shock. The patrons fell into a stunned silence as Jonah knelt down beside Eliza, his rough hands gently easing her upright. The bruises on her arms and face were a testimony to the cruelty she had suffered, but in his eyes burned a quiet promise, a promise to rescue her from a life of relentless torment. "Come with me," Jonah whispered in a tone that conveyed safety, a refuge born from the raw, unspoken scars of his own past. Without waiting for further protest, he lifted a trembling Eliza into his arms, as if gathering a precious relic, and guided her out of the Rusty Nail Saloon into the cool embrace of the desert night. Outside, the fading gaslights mingled with the stars as they embarked on a journey away from Bitter Springs' haunted alleys. Behind them, among the restless shadows, a lone rider paused. From afar, his eyes glinted with a disturbing intensity as he watched Eliza, the gold band on her wrist catching the flickering light. That silent gaze, heavy with unspoken secrets and burning greed, marked the beginning of a mystery that crept like desert chill into every heartbeat. Jonah led them swiftly along a narrow, dusty trail that cut through Bitter Springs, its forlorn paths bearing witness to countless sorrowful goodbyes. The relentless winds carried faint echoes of traders' whispers from the market, murmurs that foretold of treachery and mourning. As the trio rode on, Jonah guiding a creaking stagecoach pulled by an old, tired mule, the vast Arizona desert unfolded before them like a tapestry of desolation and possibility. The stark landscape, with its red earth and spindly cacti, contrasted bitterly with the fragile hope in Eliza's eyes, a hope that glimmered as solely as the gold band which she wore. The stagecoach's wheels whirled over the hardened road, tossing up small clouds of dust that shimmered like lost memories in the moonlight. Jonah's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where the silhouettes of rugged mesas stood like solemn sentinels, guarding the secrets of the land. At his side, Eliza clutched her tattered satchel, a meager possession that concealed within it the secret of her family's legacy. Unbeknownst to most, hidden among its folds was a weathered locket bearing a map to a fertile oasis, a hidden valley once prospering with life, now stolen away by a treacherous betrayal. The locket, its surface etched with delicate patterns of a crescent moon entwined with a solitary star, pulsed softly as if alive with the promise of a miracle. As the stagecoach trundled onward against the backdrop of a star-dappled sky, a battered homestead emerged from the horizon, a modest refuge known as Silver Seraph Homestead. The home, fashioned of sun-baked adobe and weathered by the relentless desert, exuded a quiet strength and warmth that belied its simple exterior. Jonah eased the stagecoach to a halt at its threshold, where he gently helped Eliza and her small child descend onto the dusty ground. Their arrival resonated like a silent hymn of hope within the very walls of the homestead. Inside, the homestead's narrow rooms were dimly lit by the glow of a single oil lamp. The air was filled with the comforting sound of low fire crackling and the subtle aroma of hot bread baking over a wood fire. As Jonah laid Eliza down on a rough-hewn cot and covered her with a faded quilt, a lingering unease hovered just at the edge of the room, an unspoken reminder of the night's earlier savagery, and a mysterious rider whose eyes had burned with dire intent. In the quiet after the storm of violence at the saloon, Eliza's eyes fluttered open just enough to catch the tender gaze of Jonah, who introduced himself in a voice that was both gentle and firm. "I'm Jonah Creed. You're safe now." The words, sparse as they were, carried the promise of sanctuary and whisper of a life reborn away from the cruelty of bitter springs. Yet as Jonah spoke, the memory of that cold, calculating gaze from the mysterious rider loomed behind Eliza's vision, an echo of betrayal yet unresolved, and a secret that had ignited Silas Vane's hidden fury. For a long, heavy moment, only the sound of the wind and the creak of ancient timbers filled the silence between them. As the stagecoach's wheels faded into the distance and the desert reclaimed its quiet majesty, Eliza's gold band caught the flickering lamplight, its shine hinting at an untold truth. What secret makes him burn with such greed, she thought, her mind awash with a mixture of grief, fear, and a budding, desperate hope that perhaps this lone cowboy could offer her not just shelter, but redemption from a past that had battered her every day. In that charged pause, as the desert night stretched out into eternity and the homestead's modest walls cradled a fragile promise of a new beginning, a single question reverberated like a dirge through the silence. Who was still chasing after her, and what dark betrayal lay hidden in that gleaming band? As Jonah Creed's gentle promise mingles with the lingering thread of that uncanny rider's gaze, what secret ignites Silas Vane's burning greed? And how deep does the shame in Eliza's gold band truly run? Starlight carved shadows over Silver Seraph Homestead, where the desert's wail whispered of secrets unspoken, and the ancient adobe glowed under a vault of stars. In the cool aftermath of the cruel evening at Bitter Springs, the homestead offered a fragile refuge from a world of brutality. Here, beneath the vast Arizona sky of the late 1870s, a quiet sanctuary emerged, one where healing might begin, even as past terrors still murmured on the wind. Inside the humble dwelling, Jonah Creed worked gently by the low-burning hearth. The soft crackle of the fire mingled with the distant moan of the desert wind as he diligently attended to Eliza Dunn. Her fever, a bitter reminder of the abuse she had endured at the Rusty Nail Saloon, still lingered in her pale, trembling frame. Jonah's rough, steady hands measured herbs and water with a care that contrasted with the harsh cruelty of Bitter Springs. He laid a cool compress on her forehead and murmured, "You're safe here." His voice, low and full of compassion born from hard-won experience, blended with the rustling sagebrush beyond the adobe walls. Eliza's eyes blinked slowly open, reflecting both pain and tentative relief. In the soft glow of the lamp, the delicate gold band on her wrist shimmered like a silent promise. As the cooling herbal steam rose around her, she hesitated. Then in a voice barely above a whisper said, "My locket, it holds a secret. A map, I believe." Her gaze dropped to the thin, expensive chain that barely held a small, engraved locket. With trembling fingers, she produced a locket from beneath her threadbare shawl and opened it carefully, revealing on a faded interior its tiny, intricate map. The map bore a crescent moon entwined with solitary star, the same emblem reflected in the subtle gleam of her gold band. Jonah paused, his heart heavy with the memories of his own fractured past. "Your father discovered that oasis," he said slowly, his tone mingling sorrow with a spark of hope. "He found a spring-fed grove, a secret valley where water once ran free, a promise of life in these barren lands." Eliza's eyes glistened as she continued. "Silas Vane stole it all. They framed me for the theft after he killed my father, so they could control what was ours." Each syllable felt like a brittle shard of truth, painful yet liberating. For a brief moment, the silence between them spoke louder than any words, interlacing the echoes of old betrayals with new promises of redemption. Jonah's face darkened as he recalled the past. "I lost my own. My family perished in a fire," he admitted, voice rough with unresolved grief. "I suspect it was no accident. I've wandered these plains seeking a way to redeem that loss, to restore hope. Perhaps now, with your secret, a miracle could be found." His confession, uttered in the intimate intimacy of the softly lit room, wove their shared pain into a tapestry of fragile trust. Outside, the winds moaned deepened, and somewhere in the distance, the steady sound of hoofbeats punctuated the night air. Amos Kane, a grizzled tracker known for his unyielding nature, had been venturing near the homestead. Minutes later, his weathered figure appeared at the threshold, rooted by a grim discovery. Clutched in his calloused hand was a blood-stained rag, its charred edge marked with the very same crescent star emblem. In a low, urgent tone, Amos said, "I found this near the canyon's edge. They're here. Silas's men are approaching." A shiver raced through the room as Jonah's eyes met those of Eliza, both of them aware that the fragile peace they'd begun to build was under threat. Jonah's protective instincts surged. "Don't worry. We'll be ready," he promised as he rose, his steady gaze momentarily softening as he glanced at the locket and gold band on Eliza's wrist. Yet the danger was tangible. The note Amos's rag invoked, the written warning, "What does the deed hide?" hung in the air like a curse. Later that evening, as the night deepened to a cool, star-strewn canvas above the homestead, Jonah and Eliza moved quietly to prepare for what may be coming. Outside, the adobe walls shivered in the chilly desert breeze, and the sagebrush sighed against the endless dunes. They stepped out to inspect the perimeter, checking that every window was barricaded and every door firmly latched. As Jonah inspected the winding path along the canyon's edge, his eyes caught the unmistakable imprint of a solitary boot, fresh in the damp earth. The delicate print, set against the cool night, carried with it the unmistakable message of pursuit. He retraced the tracks silently, each step resonating with the soft crunch of gravel underfoot, until the edge of the canyon revealed a tangle of disturbed sand, a scar left by a stranger's relentless passage. Returning to the homestead, Jonah's face was etched in concentration and quiet dread. "They're closing in," he declared, voice barely rising above the rustling wind. In the living room, Eliza's face was a study in conflicting emotions. As much as her heart ached with fear of being recaptured by the ghosts of her past, there flickered now a sliver of defiance. With quiet resolve, she reached for her locket again, tracing its worn inscription with a trembling finger. "This map," she murmured, "it speaks of a hidden oasis, a spring-fed grove that my father once discovered." The words tumbled from her, with equal parts sorrow and hope. "They stole it from us and from me." Jonah stepped forward and gently grasped her hand, his own rough, callous fingers communicating silent reassurance. "Eliza, you are safe here. Your pain and our shared loss can be the foundation of something new." His eyes, dark and reflective, held the weight of desperation and a kind of resolute determination born of a lifetime's suffering. Yet his words flitted uncertainly as doubt lay heavy in the air, an anxiety that the map and its promise might draw far more danger than solace. Amos, now resting against a weathered post outside, watched with grim eyes as the conversation unfolded. The distant echo of hoofbeats returned once more, stronger and prouder this time, rattling the stone and stirring the dust. In the cool night, every sound, the wind's mournful cry, the steady drip of water from the leaky eaves, even the soft sigh of a weary homestead, seemed to pulse in ominous unison. The fragile sanctuary that Silver Seraph Homestead represented, so recently a cradle of healing, was now equally a fortress under siege. As Eliza and Jonah resumed their quiet work rearranging the few belongings around the flickering fireplace, an unsettling tension grew. A stray gust of wind knocked over a clay vase near the doorway. Its shattered pieces scattered like broken promises on the rough floor. Jonah's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and unspoken resolve as he hurried outside to gather the shards before they were taken as an omen by superstitious traders passing through Drabone's whispered gossip. Inside, Eliza sat silently, her gaze falling to the gold band that gleamed softly in the dim, flickering light. She recalled the brutality of the saloon and Silas Vane's callous punishment, and an old, buried scar of shame stirred in her heart. Yet now, with Jonah at her side, she dared to hope that the secret, the map to a hidden oasis, a vision of fertile promise, might be the key to redemption. But the escalating threat of pursuing men loomed ever closer, and every tiny sound felt magnified in the heavy silence. As the night deepened over the vast, starry expanse of the Wyoming prairie, Jonah and Eliza shared one last, lingering look, an unspoken pledge of mutual trust that would soon be tested to its very limits. Outside, the fresh boot print scarred the canyon's edge as an omen, a stark reminder that the dangerous eyes of Silas's men now turned ever inward upon their newfound refuge. In that moment, as the wind's moan grew louder and the rustle of approaching forces echoed faintly against the far dunes, the fragile hope nurtured by the secret locket, the gold band, and the hidden deed trembled under the weight of inevitable confrontation. The cryptic clues hinted at an oasis of miracles, a sanctuary where water might bring life to barren land, but also at the relentless greed of those who would kill to claim it. As a distant echo of hoofbeats and the tracker's warning merged with the haunted silence of the homestead, what dreadful fate awaits them, and what dark truth does the locket, with its hidden map, truly conceal? Moonlight turned the canyon to silver, but a tracker's shadow still haunted Silver Seraph's fragile peace. The quiet of the desert night was broken only by the gentle rustle of sagebrush and the steady, low moan of the wind across weathered adobe. Inside the homestead, the afterglow of chaos gave way to a hushed calm, as if the earth itself was holding its breath for what must come next. Over the course of these long, somber hours, Eliza Dunn began to regain strength. Her fever had ebbed, leaving her pale but determined, a fragile figure forged by hardship whose eyes betrayed both sorrow and emerging resolve. Jonah Creed moved quietly about the modest interior, his steps measured as he bagged small bundles of herbs and tended carefully to the simmering pot of stew on the low fire. Between his labors, he helped mend the worn blankets and furs that kept the chill of the desert at bay, his every action filled with a tender protectiveness born of deep-seated guilt and hope. In one such quiet moment, as Jonah sat on a creaking stool near the flickering lamp, Eliza gathered her courage to share more of the secret that had haunted her for so long. She had clutched her locket, its small, delicate chain glinting softly under the lamp's glow, and now, with trembling hands, she opened it to reveal the faded map hidden within. The tiny parchment bore cryptic markings, a crescent moon cradling a solitary star, and a series of winding lines that pointed toward a place called the Oasis. Her voice, barely above a whisper, broke the stillness. "It wasn't always like this," Eliza murmured, eyes fixed on a map as if it contained all her shattered memories. "My father found that oasis, a spring-fed grove hidden deep in the canyon. They said its waters could make barren lands bloom. But Silas Vane, he was greedy beyond measure. Killed my father and stole that map to seize the water, to control what belonged to us." Her confession trembled in the air, every word a soft exhale of grief and bitter betrayal. Jonah listened, his heart heavy with his own unspoken regret. In the quiet, his rugged features softened beneath the lamp's light as he admitted, "I, too, bear scars of betrayal. I suspect the fire that took my family was no accident. Perhaps it was set to settle debts I once could not refuse. His voice was low and pained, each word reverberating with the agony of loss and the burden of secrets. The shared anguish between them wove a fragile thread of trust, a bond that promised solidarity in a world that had shown them nothing but cruelty. Outside, the distant sound of hoofbeats still echoed through the night, as if approaching with deliberate intent. Amos Kane, Silas's brutal tracker, had already left his mark. Moments ago, the menacing note had been discovered, nailed to a weathered fence post just outside the homestead. It read simply, "Return the map or burn." The crescent star emblem stamped on the ragged paper was unmistakable, a clear sign of Silas's relentless pursuit. Its stark message hung in the cool air, a threat that made every creak of the adobe and every whisper of the wind seem foreboding. As the night's chill deepened, Jonah and Eliza knelt together at a small wooden table in the parlor, poring over the locket's faded map. By the light of a solitary oil lamp, they traced the cryptic lines with careful, reverent fingers. It says, "Where the Star River meets Shadow Rock." Jonah noted quietly, his eyes narrowing as he tried to decipher the symbols. The phrase struck him with a mix of wonder and urgency, a promise of a hidden oasis in the vast, unforgiving desert, a place where water might once again breathe life into scorched land. He glanced over at Eliza, whose face was cast in a pale glow that accentuated both vulnerability and determination. "If we can find this place," he said softly, "we might claim not only our freedom, but also the legacy that was stolen from you and from us all." Eliza's gaze lingered on the map, as if it could speak the truth of her past in silent, undeniable language. Her lips parted almost in a plea. "I never wanted anyone to know what I carry," she confessed, voice catching with a mix of shame and raw hope. "That locket belonged to my father. He found that oasis, and for a moment there was promise, a future where we would be free of all that misery. But Silas, driven by greed, shattered that dream, casting me off as too weak to work, too sick to bear the burden of our loss." The weight of her words pressed down on the cramped room, mingling with the aroma of herbs and the soft, mournful crackle of the fire. Jonah reached out hesitantly, placing a rough hand over hers, an unspoken pledge of protection. "We will find it," he vowed with quiet strength, "for your father, and for all of us who have been forsaken." His tone carried both certainty and the sharp sting of his own hidden sorrows. Just then, a sudden disturbance outside shattered the tender scene. The steady sound of the wind, already a chorus of nature's lament, was abruptly interrupted by a sharp, deliberate clatter, one more hoofbeat striking against stone. Jonah's eyes snapped to the window, and he rose swiftly. "They're closer now," he murmured, voice tight with apprehension. Outside, the silhouettes of figures emerged against the backdrop of a moonlit canyon. Torchlight flickered intermittently, dancing upon the rugged walls, hinting that Silas's men were drawing near to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Amos had already scouted the outskirts and left no doubt as to the approaching threat. His earlier grim report had stoked a quiet anxiety throughout the homestead, and now the unmistakable flash of torchlight on the distant canyon ridge stoked it into a roaring tension. Jonah exchanged a determined look with Eliza. The quiet resolve of his gaze mingled with the fear of inevitable conflict. "We can't let them take this," he whispered firmly, eyes fixed on the approaching gleam. "We'll follow the map and secure the oasis before they reach us." Eliza's breath hitched, a tremor of both terror and hope running through her. She brushed a stray lock of hair from her damp forehead and pressed the locket close. "I've waited so long for this moment," she said, voice soft yet resolute, "for a chance to reclaim what was lost." Her words, though few, echoed like a pledge in the cool night air. As the distant torchlight grew brighter and the sound of hooves reached a crescendo, the homestead's fragile walls seemed to shudder under the weight of the impending threat. Each gust of wind carried with it the scent of burning wood and metal, a foretaste of what was to come. Jonah stepped to the door, peering out into the moonlit darkness where the landscape lay painted in silver outlines and eerie shadows. The locket's soft glow, The cryptic map and the whispered promise of the oasis were all that stood between them and the greedy ambition of Silas's men. The tension became almost palpable. A silent question reverberated in the chilly night. Could they, with hearts battered by loss yet kindled by hope, reach the desert's secret sanctuary before the ambush shattered their fragile hope? In that charged pause, as the approaching torchlight flickered on the canyon's edge and the sound of imminent danger swelled like a tide, Jonah and Eliza exchanged one final, resolute glance. Their shared determination to reclaim the legacy stolen from her, a legacy that promised both redemption and survival, merged with the cold certainty of the night. The map before them, scrawled in fading ink, was not merely a record of a lost oasis. It was their only chance at reclaiming dignity, at mending fractured hearts, and at creating a future where the tyranny of the past would no longer dictate their fate. As torchlight flared on the canyon's edge and the distant sound of hooves grew ever nearer, will the looming ambush shatter their fragile hope, or can they find the secret oasis and reclaim what was stolen from them? Torches blazed like manifestations of vengeance, encircling Silver Seraph Homestead as Silas Vane's men closed in. Under a moon that stained the desert with silver sorrow, the adobe walls trembled as harsh voices, and the sharp crack of rifles shattered the fragile peace. Amid that chaos, Jonah Creed stood resolute at the threshold, his eyes dark and determined as he faced the encroaching threat. Every gust of wind carried the stench of scorched sand and blood, while the relentless night revealed the true cost of betrayal. Outside, the desert's cold embrace collided with the ferocity of diverging wills. Silas Vane, his features lit intermittently by the dancing flames of torches, rode forward with an air of charismatic cruelty. His voice, like a low growl seeping through the wind, cut across the tumult. "Hand over the map, Creed," he bellowed, his eyes narrowed on the precious locket secretly held by Eliza Dunn. "You know it belongs to me. I framed her for being too weak, too sick to work, and for stealing what was rightfully mine." Jonah's jaw tightened as he retorted in a measured tone, "That map is not for you to claim, Silas. It is our only hope for reclaiming what was stolen from the ones we loved." His words, heavy with unsaid memories and buried grief from fires and betrayals of his own past, resonated against the relentless clamor of the ambush. Inside the homestead's dimly lit main room, a space defined by its rough-hewn furniture and a single oil lamp whose flame danced with desperate life, Eliza's eyes shone with both defiance and sorrow. She had long guarded the secret of the locket, a treasure passed down from her father, who once discovered a hidden oasis, a spring-fed grove that promised to transform barren lands into fertile renewal. Now, with Silas Vane's threat hanging thick in the stifling air, she steeled herself to reveal the truth that had haunted her since that fateful night at Bitter Springs. With a trembling breath, Eliza spoke softly, her voice quivering yet resolute. "My father, he was a good man. He found the oasis and believed that its waters could cure the desolation of our lives. But Silas, he betrayed us. He murdered my father and later framed me to cover his greed, so that he could seize the water, enslave our claim, and profit from the misery of others." Her words, heavy as desert stones, filled the quiet corners of the room with a grief sharpened by betrayal. The gold band on her wrist, now more a symbol of her enduring dignity than of shame, caught the light as if to emphasize the legacy she had inherited, one of lost honor and stolen promise. Jonah stepped closer, his face etched in the fading light with empathy and fierce protectiveness. "Eliza, I know what it means to lose everything," he murmured, his voice low, carrying the weight of a personal tragedy, a fire that had taken his family, leaving him a wanderer in a relentless land. "But we cannot let the past define us. We must defend what remains and fight for a future that brings life to this barren earth." His words fused with quiet sound of the wind through cracked adobe and the distant, rhythmic pounding of hooves, instilling a sense of determined hope amid the looming peril. At that moment, Amos Kane, the grizzled tracker whose loyalty to Silas was as cold as his demeanor, reappeared from the shadows. He carried with him another grim token, a note affixed to a splintered piece of wood from the homestead's battered fence. Scrawled across it in hurried, jagged ink were the words, "Return the map or face ruin." The note, bearing the unmistakable crescent and star emblem, confirmed the relentless pursuit of Silas's men and amplified the dread that had already taken root in every heart. Jonah's eyes narrowed as he read the note. "They're here to snuff out any hope of redemption," he said quietly, anger burning in his gaze. "We must secure the map and lay low until we can move to find a hidden oasis where the Star River meets Shadow Rock, as it reads." His words, though uttered in a hushed whisper, carried the promise of action tempered by strategic resolve. As the sounds of clashing metal and muffled shouts drifted from outside, Jonah and Eliza hurriedly began to fortify the homestead's defenses. Jonah directed Amos and a few other trusted ranch hands to barricade the windows with rough-hewn planks, while Eliza carefully concealed her locket and the faded map within a small, hidden safe beneath a loose floor tile. Each action was performed with quiet urgency, a desperate effort to shield their fragile future from the inevitable storm of Silas's greed. In a brief lull between the sporadic bursts of gunfire and the piercing cries of enemies across the open desert, Eliza and Jonah found a moment of fragile intimacy. Sitting side by side on a low wooden bench near the flickering lamp, they let the silence speak volumes. The soft cry of a distant harmonica, played by an unknown hand, mingled with the low, steady hum of the wind, weaving a tapestry of hope and despair intertwined. "We must trust each other," Jonah said, his rough hand covering hers in a gesture of unwavering solidarity. "I promise I won't betray you, not if it means fulfilling the dream we both hold dear." His eyes, reflecting a sorrow too deep for words, met hers, and the moment stretched like a fragile promise in the darkness. Eliza's voice was barely audible as she replied, I've been alone for so long, holding on to the secret of my fathers. My very soul is tied to that oasis. I fear that trusting anyone might shatter what little I have left." Her words trembled in the quiet, echoing the years of isolation that had defined her life. Yet, in that same heart, a spark ignited, a defiant ember of possibility that perhaps, with Jonah's steadfast loyalty, she could reclaim her legacy and heal the wounds of her past. Just as these whispered vows of trust began to mend the fragile bonds between them, the night exploded in a flurry of imminent violence. The torches outside flared up fiercely, and like bolts from a darkened sky, the sound of rifles split the night air as Silas's men surged forward. The clash of chaos crashed against the wooden defenses of the homestead. Gunfire, shouts, and the frantic thundering of boots meshed in a deadly symphony. Jonah bolted to the door, rifle raised high. The sudden eruption of violence forced every soul in Silver Seraph into a desperate stand. "Hold fast," he roared, his voice slicing to the tumult as he took aim. In the ensuing moments, the homestead became a bastion of resilience amid a sea of ruthless ambition. Amos surged forth with his own grim determination, his eyes cold and unyielding as he targeted the advancing figures with practiced precision. Amid the savage din of the ambush, a subtle yet important detail emerged. On the wall of the homestead, a shard of broken glass shimmered in the flicker of the oil lamp, reflecting the glint of the gold band hidden away with the map. This detail, so minute and yet so potent, spoke of a hidden legacy that could restore not just the land but the dignity of those wronged by Silas's greed. As chaos raged outside, Jonah and Eliza, with hearts thundering in tandem, exchanged one final, resolute gaze. The sound of gunfire, the piercing yells of adversaries, and the relentless clatter of approaching hooves all converged to form a singular, haunting question that now hung in the charged air. Will their fragile hope survive the relentless assault? In that tenuous moment, when the very fate of Silver Seraph Homestead seemed poised on a razor's edge, a bold and fearful whisper echoed through the tumult. Can they withstand Silas's wrath? The cry seemed to vibrate with every ounce of loss, guilt, and defiant resolve that filled the hearts of those within the beleaguered homestead. As the ambush surged closer, the flames and the torches danced across the scorched adobe walls, and amid the surging chaos, Jonah's rifle cracked with the ferocity of a man fighting not just for survival, but for redemption a redemption that promised honor the lost and heal the broken. As gunfire erupts around them and the inferno of torches embraces the homestead, will Jonah and Eliza's fragile hope and the precious secret of the locket's map withstand Silas's brutal onslaught? And can they emerge in this darkness to reclaim their stolen future? Gunfire faded under Arizona's stars, but Silver Seraph Homestead's scarred adobe whispered of fight unfinished. In the dying echo of chaos, torchlight sputtered across the desert, casting long, trembling shadows as Silas Vane's men began to disperse into the night. The anguished cries of battle had softened to a simmering murmur, leaving behind a heavy silence broken only by the occasional crack of a rifle and the forlorn sigh of the wind. Amid this fragile calm, Jonah Creed and Eliza Dunn emerged from the embattled homestead, their faces streaked with sweat, soot, and determination. Each step they took on the dusty ground felt laden with the weight of loss and the promise of redemption. Earlier that tumultuous night, as the assault raged, Jonah and Eliza had fought not only for survival, but for the integrity of a secret that meant more than personal pride. It was a key to a long-forgotten oasis, the legacy of Eliza's murdered father. With their hearts pounding in unison, they contrived a desperate plan. Eliza, using the clues deciphered from her faded locket and the brittle map etched inside, deliberately misled the advancing attackers. Stealthily, she retraced the map's false trail, a route leading to a dead end in a dry gulch where water was nowhere to be found. As Silas's men diverted their course in a frenzy agreed, some of them began to quarrel among themselves, confused by the barren terrain. Their number thinned, and the tide of the assault slowly ebbed. Amos Kane, the brutal tracker whose grim loyalty had only amplified the threat, had led his band to the homestead, but now their cohesion was broken. In the midst of the melee, a gruff trader, an unexpected ally from Bitter Springs known simply as Silas Sully McCrae, rushed onto the scene. Clad in weathered duster and carrying a ledger stained with time and treachery, Sully's eyes burned with righteous fury. With a commanding voice, he produced evidence on the ledger, proof of Silas Vane's crimes, pages that chronicled bribes, falsified accounts, and the unspeakable betrayal of innocent blood. His revelation sowed seeds of doubt among some of Kane's own men, fracturing their unity. The assembled attackers, now fractured by internal discord and the sting of evidence against their master, began to falter. Amid the chaos, Silas Vane himself appeared on a high ridge overlooking the homestead, his face twisted in rage and desperation. In one final burst of defiance, he fired a shot that tore through the dark. The projectile struck him, drawing a pained cry, and Silas staggered, wounded and disoriented. His men, seeing their leader falter, quickly retreated into the sanctuary of the night, leaving the homestead and its defenders trembling in the aftermath. Inside Silver Seraph, as the last echoes of gunfire faded, Jonah and Eliza gathered what remained of their scarce possessions and inspected the damage. Broken planks, shattered glass, and smoldering debris bore vivid testimony to the night's terrors, while the air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt wood and scorched earth. Jonah's silhouette, rugged and resolute, moved methodically to secure the homestead's vulnerable points. He helped gather the wounded, offering steady words of comfort and protection even as his mind reeled from a near catastrophe. Eliza, her breast shallow yet conflicted, clutched the locket and gold band that had sparked this legacy of strife. They now represented not shame, but the hope of reclaiming a future loss agreed. After the ambush had subsided, the weary survivors found a moment's quiet by the rekindled hearth. Under the solemn watch of a star-studded desert sky, Jonah and Eliza unfurled a fragile map once more. By the soft light of a single lantern, they traced the cryptic clues with trembling fingers. Where the Star River meets Shadow Rock, Jonah murmured, his voice filled with hope and reverence. The phrase resonated deep within him, stirring memories of the wife he had lost and the fervent prayers whispered into barren nights. Eliza's eyes shone as she recalled her father's legacy, a promise that water, abundance, and life once flowed freely to heal the worst of deserts. "This is our chance," she said, voice quiet yet unyielding. "We must follow the map, find the oasis that was stolen from us, and reclaim our honor." In that soft, resolved declaration, the two souls, scarred by cruelty and bitterness, found solace in the shared dream of renewal. Determined and united, they set out at dawn. The next morning, as the first blush of light painted the vast Arizona sky in gentle hues of gold and lavender, Jonah led Eliza along a winding path toward the canyon's edge. Their footsteps stirred the ancient dust, and the rhythmic sound of their journey blended with nature's own heartbeat. The low hum of the wind, the distant cry of a hawk, the rustling of dying sagebrush. Every now and then, a soft burst of harmonica echoed from some unseen musician in the distance, adding a wistful melody to the unfolding epic. Following the map's faded instructions, they reached a ridge where a narrow riverbed, known by the locals as the Star River, carved a sinuous path through the rugged canyon. There, beneath a copse of time-worn junipers, lay the hidden oasis, a spring-fed grove where water bubbled from the rocks, nurturing a burst of green amid a canvas of arid dust and omens of past despair. The scene was breathtaking in its contrast, lush, vibrant, and defiant against the relentless desert. Soft mists rose from the spring, catching the early light like fleeting specters of hope, and the air was rich with the scent of wet earth and burgeoning life. Tears glistened in Eliza's eyes as she knelt by the spring. Here in the cool, life-affirming water, the legacy of her father and the cruel theft by Silas Vane found their climax. "This," she whispered, voice filled with both sorrow and unyielding hope, "is what was meant for us. Not a life of endless pain, but a future where every parched bone and broken dream might be renewed." Jonah, standing steadfast beside her, felt the full weight of redemption settle upon his tired heart. In that oasis, he saw not only the promise of restoring barren lands, as his late wife had once dreamed, but also a path toward healing the deep-seated wounds of his own solitary existence. With the oasis reclaimed in spirit and purpose, the remaining shadows of the past began to dissipate. Word of their discovery spread quietly through bitter springs, and the oppressive whispers of the traders once filled with scorn slowly shifted to respectful murmurs. Silas Vane's treachery was exposed by the evidence carried by the trader who had aided them, and his power over the land's destiny crumbled like ash in the wind. Though wounded and defeated, his legacy of greed and betrayal was vanquished by the unyielding force of truth and the bonds of newfound family. Months later, beneath a radiant Arizona sun and against a backdrop of rolling green, where once it was only dust, Jonah, Eliza, and little Jem rebuilt Silver Seraph Homestead at the edge of the rejuvenated oasis. Together, they plowed the fertile soil, sowed seeds of hope, and nurtured a burgeoning garden where the spring's water breathed life into every furrow. The oasis, a hidden grove where water sang beneath starlight and the wind carried whispers of redemption, became their sanctuary. In that sacred place, the scars of their past, from Eliza's brutal beatings to Jonah's lifelong grief, slowly healed into quiet strength. In the gentle twilight that followed a long day's labor, the family gathered outside their modest home. A harmonica played a mournful yet hopeful tune in the distance, blending with the soft ripple of water from the rejuvenated spring. Jonah's eyes, deep with reflective resolve, met Eliza's with a smile that held both gratitude and the promise of tomorrow. "We have found our peace here," he murmured, voice steady and proud. Eliza, now standing taller than before, clutched her gold band, a symbol of the legacy restored and the dignity reclaimed, and nodded, her eyes reflecting the shimmering promise of the oasis. In that bittersweet epilogue, the rugged homestead transformed under the nurturing embrace of nature. Though the memories of past cruelty still lingered like distant echoes, they no longer defined their tomorrow. The fertile ground that had once been stolen was now a vibrant garden of resilience, a testimony to the strength found in redemption and profound bonds of a chosen family. As the stars crowned the clear night sky over the rejuvenated valley, their light winked like silent blessings, prompting a gentle, reflective question. Did they find peace? The sanctuary of the oasis, with its ever-flowing spring and the soft, persistent murmur of life, stood as a monument to both the pain of the past and the resilient hope of the future. In that sacred moment, Amidst the quiet lull of a desert reborn, Jonah, Eliza, and little Jem embrace the promise of a new day, a new beginning gleaming with the potential to heal even the deepest of wounds.